Hi everyone, I'm Sachin and welcome to Simply Economics. Our lesson for today is demand and supply, which is the second unit in your syllabus. Now let's start off by learning about what demand is. Now we can define demand as the quantity of a good or service purchased at alternative market prices at a particular time period when all other factors are held constant. Now what this simply means is the quantity of a good which is purchased at a certain price at a certain time. Okay, so when there's want, that is the willingness to buy something, the purchasing power or the ability to buy something, along with the plan of the consumer, that is a plan to purchase, demand is satisfied. What basically that means is when there's want and ability to buy, when there's the willingness and the ability to buy something, it is known as effective demand. That demand is complete. Okay, and demand can get pretty scary sometimes. Anyway, demand can be classified as individual demand and market demand. Now the word itself defines what this means. Individual demand means at a certain time the various quantities ready to buy by one person, okay, by an individual at the prices in the market. However, the market demand means the summation, the sum of all the demand of all those individuals in that market. Now these demand curves clearly shows us the difference between this. Now the first one is consumer one's demand, then consumer two's demand, and then the market curve. Now the market demand curve has been obtained by adding the individual demands at separate prices. When you just add it, you can get the market demand curve. So what you have to remember here is that the market demand curve is always much more steeper than the individual demand curve. Okay, now we also have to differentiate what want and demand is. Now want, we know, is the willingness of consumers to purchase to satisfy their requirements. These requirements, wants, are unlimited. However, demand refers to the wants that are actually fulfilled by them. Now you may want to buy a BMW and a Rolls Royce, okay, but so that's the want, and then you end up, now you want to buy the BMW and the Rolls Royce, but you have the ability to buy only the BMW, let's say. Okay, that's also pretty good. And anyway, you end up buying only the BMW. Therefore there's demand for BMW while there's a want for both of those vehicles. So I hope you understood that. Now that we know what demand is, okay, we have to learn about the determinants of demand. That means these determinants determine the willingness or the ability to buy. Now let's look at the price of the concerned good. Okay, when prices increase, our willingness to buy that good will reduce, okay, too expensive, and the ability also might fall. Why? I can't afford something that expensive. Okay, and then price of related goods. Now related goods are substitute goods and complementary goods. So if the price of another substitute good falls, you'll end up buying that good. So then the demand for the good under consideration will fall. Then consumer income, when your income increases, your ability to buy increases, therefore you can buy more. All right, consumer taste. Now these are trends basically. Now there's a trend for a certain type of clothes, then there's more demand for that type, but when the trend expires, there's going to be less demand. Then future expectations, you expect that price will fall in the future, then you won't buy it now, you'll wait till the price falls. Okay, then the number of buyers. So now there are more buyers for a certain good, obviously demand will increase. And then there are other factors such as government subsidies and all that, government regulations and all that, which we'll learn later. And then in addition to these determinants, we also have to know about the demand function, which is stated in red here. Okay, so it basically has all the determinants included in it. These are the short term letters of those. Why? The demand depends on these on these determinants. So now that we know there's something called determinants, okay, obviously there are determinants for anything, but in demand we know there are certain things that determine the demand. Now the theory of demand states that the changes of demand happens according to changes of determinants of demand. Alright, so when determinants of demand changes, demand changes. Okay, remember, demand changes. Now look at this. Now the price here is constant. Now let's take the first example, consumer income. Now when your income increases, when the price is constant, you still have the ability to buy more, so your demand will increase. From D to D1 your income will increase. Okay, and then just think, now one trend to wear white shoes or whatever has now expired, then slowly now the price of the goods is still the same, but the demand for that good will start to fall. Right, next we have the law of demand. Now the law of demand, okay, states that everything else being equal, that is the determinants of demand being equal, when the price of the product increases, quantity demanded falls, or when the price of the product falls, quantity demand increases. All right, so basically what the law of demand states is there is an inverse relationship between quantity demand and price when all other factors are held constant. Now just assume you were at point B, purchasing at point B, which is P2 Q2. Now if the price increases to P1, the quantity demand will reduce to Q1, which will be point A. Alright, so that's what the law of demand states. Okay, so this is shown through a movement along the curve. Now earlier in the theory of demand, the demand curve shifts. Here the point will shift along the demand curve. The demand curve will not change in the law of demand. Now this is a very important question asked basically every year in a different way, but this is the base for all those questions. What? The reasons for demand curve to slope downwards, or the reasons for the law of demand. So they can ask this in different ways. Explain the law of demand, explain the demand curve. So for all that, you need to know about the two reasons, the substitution effect and the income effect. First, let's learn about the income effect. Now, when you hear the word income, don't think about your father's salary, because that's not the income we are going to talk about here. Alright, so this is where most people get confused. Here the income we are talking about is real income, which is the purchasing power of consumers. Okay, so now we know what real income is. Okay, so you can actually, if you remember this as the real income effect, that's better because you won't get confused, but don't write real because it's the income effect. So what the income effect means is that when the price of a product falls, the real income of the consumer increases, and therefore when this extra real income is also used to purchase the same good, quantity demanded for the product increases. Now you must have gotten confused already, but it is very simple. Let's look at this example. Now Jane had 100 rupees. That's the real income of Jane. What? The income that she's going to spend, the purchasing power. Okay, so an apple is 10 rupees. So the purchasing power she has is for 10 apples. Do you get it? The real income is for 10 apples. 10 into 10 is 100. But then the price of apples, while she's going to the market, the price of an apple falls to 5 rupees. Then Jane's real income increases to 50. Why? To 20 apples. What's that? Now she had 100 rupees to spend on 10 apples. But now 10 apples is only 50 rupees. So if she still buys only 10 apples, she has 50 rupees remaining. Now this remaining 50 is her extra real income. So when she spends this extra 50 also on apples, she'll be buying 10 more apples. Why? One is only 5 rupees. So she'll end up buying 20 apples. So when price falls from 5 to 10, quantity demanded increase from 10 to 20. Okay. That's the income effect. Now in the income effect, this is a question that comes mostly in MCQs, but if you remember it this way, it's very simple. Alright, now look at this. This is a different example, but the price and quantity demand, I wrote this down because it's very important. Okay, so when the price reduces from 10 to 5, the quantity demanded increases from 100 to 200. Okay, that's what we normally learn. But the nominal income, that means the income of that person, remains at 1000. Okay, which is constant. Okay, so you have a salary, all right, that's still constant. But when the price falls to rupees 5, if you now you go with the idea of buying 100 of this certain good, let's talk about apples here, 100 apples. Okay, but then when the price falls to 5 and you still buy 100 apples, you will have 500 rupees remaining in your hand. Okay, so this is the additional purchasing power, that is the increase in real income. Now, if you buy 100 more units using this 500 purchasing power, it is known as the positive income effect. It happens with normal goods. For example, apples. You buy 100 more apples using this 500 rupees. But if you don't buy more of that good, but spend it on something else, something better, okay, that is known as negative income effect. Why? The price of the good has fallen, but the quantity demanded has not increased. Okay, so that is negative income effect, which happens with inferior goods. For example, margarine. All right, so instead of buying 100 more units of margarine, this person will buy 1 unit of butter, which is more expensive. All right, so at that point, when she buys butter, margarine becomes an inferior good. All right, and then the second reason is the substitute effect. Now the substitute effect explains that when other factors remain constant, including price of a substitute goods, all right, now we are talking about the reasons for the law of demand, okay, which happens due to the change in price of the considered good. Now the considered good here is Coca-Cola. Okay, so when other factors remain constant, including the price of substitute goods. Now the substitute good for Coca-Cola is Pepsi. Now the price of Pepsi will remain constant, okay, due to increase or decrease of the price of the concerned goods. That means when the price of Coca-Cola increased from P1 to P2, okay, the change of quantity demand of the considering good as a result of increase or decrease in relative price of the good is known as substitute effect. Now we increased our price from P1 to P2, okay, and while Pepsi, which is the substitute good, kept the price constant. Okay, so if their price was also P1, okay, but now their price is still P1 when we increase it up to P2, when we increase our price to P2, so Pepsi becomes relatively cheaper than Coca-Cola. So now we had a quantity demanded of Q1 earlier. Now it falls to Q2. What happens here was the purchase. Now think Q1 was 50 people and Q2 is only 25. So these 25 people we lost are now purchasing Pepsi, where an increase in demand has happened, while for us a decrease in quantity demanded has happened. Okay, so this explains the difference between change in quantity demanded and change in demand. Okay, now change in quantity demand happens when there's a movement along the curve, results by a change in our own price. Okay, now Coca-Cola, we increased our price and we therefore quantity demanded reduced. Now a change in demand happens when a determinant of demand changes. All right, so basically now for Pepsi, the determinants of demand, for one of the determinants of demand is prices of relative goods. Now Coca-Cola is a relative substitute goods. So when the price of the substitute good increase, the demand for this considered goods, that is the demand, yes, not the quantity demanded, the demand increase, causing the curve to shift outwards. All right, so I hope you understood that clearly, and when they ask you to explain about it, just draw two of these the demand curves and then explain it, because it will be clearer both for you and the person marking your paper.